This is Aaron Rice with Maryland Climate Tech 2026, and I'm here with a good friend, Rona. Rona, let us know who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
Thank you for having me. Nice to see you again. So my name is Rona Kobell, and I currently I am a reporter at the Baltimore Banner. I'm a regional reporter, and I cover Baltimore County, which is also where I live. But for the last 20 years, I've been an environment reporter focused on the Chesapeake Bay and on Maryland's Eastern Shore. And I am currently writing a book about topics I've been writing about for probably a decade. The book is called What Harriet Left Behind, and the subtitle is Rural Redlining, Rising Seas, and Land Loss on Maryland's Eastern Shore. And the book is really about various laws, policies, and customs that have resulted in Black Marylanders, Black Eastern Shore residents losing their generational wealth on the Eastern Shore through a variety of factors. So, just as Baltimore had redlining, actually, redlining was born in Baltimore.
Hmm.
Um, Eastern Shore had redlining also. It was a little less systemic and a little less obvious, but it was still there, and it manifested itself in many ways and continues to do so today. So the book looks at the various factors connected to that.
Absolutely. One of our themes that we're really kind of hammering home, especially when you talk about Harriet Tubman and the fact that, she bought her first home in 1859 when she was still, quote unquote, a fugitive. And up in Auburn, New York, up near my hometown. I'm from Syracuse, but home ownership, citizenship was very important to her and to the Stewards, excuse me. And so we're really focused on home ownership as a symbol of freedom, independence, and citizenship. Why did you decide to pick Harriet Tubman in the subtitle for your book?
That's a great question. One of the things that I learned early on is Harriet Tubman. We tend in American history to sort of look at figures and put them on a pedestal, which she surely does deserve. But sometimes we forget that people didn't do what they did alone. And specifically for Harriet, Harriet couldn't have done what she did without this very thick, tight community of Black residents, free and enslaved, who helped her. They passed the messages, they kept the secrets, they hid the people, and many of those families are still there. And Harriet has become obviously a household name, and people know who she is and understand what she did, but they don't understand maybe that the people who were ingrained in her life, who are part of her home, are still there, and they're still fighting for their home. And so I really wanted the story to highlight the people. I call it, I mean, I don't know if I was the first person to use this word, but I call it the Harriet Tubman relational diaspora, because they're some of them are directly related to Harriet Tubman, but many of them are not direct descendants of Tubman, but their ancestors likely knew her and her family because they all kind of worked in the same areas. So they were, even if some of them weren't able to take their own freedom, they helped others take freedom. And they're a really important part of the story. So I was very curious what had happened to them after she left. We know what happened to her, but what happened to the other people?
Right, right. I know a fellow author, Kate Larson, who's written on Harriet Tubman, likes to dispel some misunderstandings about Harriet. Do you have any of your own from engaging with descendants and spending time on the Eastern Shore? Maybe some things
Well,
that we always thought we knew about Harriet, but we're just not sure.
Kate is quite a great mentor to me, and um, I saw something yesterday or the day before that talked about Harriet Tubman working in Cape May, and said, she was an amazing cook
Hmm.
and she was a great domestic.
Mm.
And I don't know if she was a great cook, but I know she absolutely hated being a domestic.
Mm,
She did not like it,
hmm
did not want to do it, and only did it um because it was one of the very few ways that a Black woman could earn money. But I think we maybe sometimes idolize that sort of part of her, that like and also the stories that people tell about, some of the things that she said, like, I could have freed more people if only they knew that they were
right.
slaves. That has been debunked many times, but you still
Hmm
see it, like, weekly.
hmm
So yeah, and I think this idea, I mean, she was an incredible, incredible woman, and I do not want to ever take anything away from that. But there were so many people who worked with her,
hmm
like, who were heroes too, whose names we don't know as well, like Samuel Green and Jacob Jackson. They were instrumental, and I just think, you know, with anyone who does what she did, you can't do it alone. You need a community of people, and for their own survival, they had to be anonymous. Um, and so they have been anonymous, and now we really can share who they are, I think.
And I know some people might be watching and say, well, what does Harriet Tubman have to do with Maryland climate solutions or climate tech? I don't get it. Well, the reason is because, Baltimore Climate Tech 2024, 2025, Maryland Climate Tech 2026, these all started from, conversations that I had with Alex Green from Harriet Tubman Tours and watching Rona's, Eroding History film that she produced co-produced, and that meeting with with Vincent Leggett, the late great admiral of the Chesapeake, Vincent Leggett, and really what I came to realize, living here on the Western Shore as a real estate practitioner, is that the buildings that I help buy, sell, lease. Are a major part of this whole greenhouse gas emission phenomenon. And what's happening and what that means to the Eastern Shore is that our histories are slowly kind of floating away, right? American history
Yeah.
and shared memories are floating away. And so, can you talk a little bit about the film, Eroding History, and then what it was like working with the late, great Vincent Leggett as well?
Well, first I want to address, I would love to talk about that, but the
Sure.
first thing that you asked, I think everything that's Andre Chung, who worked on the film with us, he was our director. He said this, and more eloquently than I can, but everything that's happening bad in the world is happening to Black people first, basically. So, sea level rise, climate change, it's happening to Black people first because Black people are on the lowest land, and they are on the lowest land because that's the only land they were able to get, back when they were able to get land for the first time. And so climate change is not a phenomenon that affects African American residents of Maryland, you know, only, but it's affecting them disproportionately
Sure.
because of where they are.
hmm
And, why it's important is because we have already lost so many places, Aaron, and we haven't really been able to mourn the places we lost because we never really knew them to begin with. So, we talk about, oh, what happens if we lose Smith Island, and what happens if we lose, Tangier, and what I mean, or Deal Island. Well, a lot of the Black communities have already been gone. And, part of the struggle I have is kind of trying to write obituaries for them because it's really hard to find information about them, because so little was documented. But we do know that Native American settlements were first, and then they were abandoned, and then Black settlements, had to be abandoned because of flooding. Um, so that's the first thing. And second of all, Vince was a huge mentor to me, as to you, and he had some, sayings that kind of run through my head. Each one teach one. And, looking through the pages of history books, rarely do you see a Black person who gets a name or even anything more than a name. So you see a picture, it'll say oyster shucker or crab picker. But if you see, a white person, it'll say, this is so and so, and their family has been here for this many years, and they started this. And so I think it was very important to Vince to document the achievements of the Black, uh, not just Eastern Shoremen, but, Southern Maryland, um, Baltimore, anywhere where Black Americans were working on the water, to document their stories and to tell their stories, that those stories were valid, and that, um, Black oystermen really kind of set the standard for how to catch oysters. And Colburn and Jewett, they were the crab company that figured out how to grade crab meat. So we can thank them for jumbo and lump and backfin and all those distinctions that we have. They invented that scale. And there was another crabber who invented the practice of weighing crabs instead of just, selling them by the basket height, because there was ways to like rig the basket so that the middle was hollow. So all of these things came from the tradition of Black mariners in the Chesapeake Bay, to say nothing of the incredible role that they played in, securing freedom for themselves and for others. So it's a history that we haven't told enough. And Vince really, he inspired all of us who were in the film, the filmmakers, and he was really our North Star while we were making the film. And not just him, but Chanel's father, Levon, um, w- and others who were sort of guiding us, the Reverend William Wallace. They really felt like they hadn't been seen before. And so it's really important to tell these stories while the elders are still with us, because, as we learned with Vince, like you just you take for granted that the people are going to be here. And then all of a sudden, one day they're not.
Right.
And that is probably my biggest struggle with the book is it's a race against time. The land is sinking and we're losing the land and we're losing the people. I mean, so many of the people I interview for my book are elderly Black men, and I am in a race to document all of their stories. And I've done quite a bit of it, but not enough. And so, I think that's really, really important is to, get people to sit down with me and have them talk and tell me, you know, what they went through and what they achieved. So yeah, it's
Well, you've got years of credibility on the Eastern Shore, and what's it like having conversations with the descendant community? Is it a as I'm sure the novelty has worn off, and the awe it may still be there, but what's it like engaging with the descendant communities on the Eastern Shore?
I think these are the absolute best people I've ever known. They are incredible, kind.
Hmm.
Um, uh, I can't say enough about how welcoming they've been, how honest they've been.
Hmm.
I do feel that I am part of the family.
Hmm.
I go to church and I'm welcomed,
Hmm.
to various churches, not just one.
Right, right.
And
And
I think
not during election years, right?
no, no. I go when I'm able, when I can get away and go to the shore. I have two kids, so I can't be there as often as I want. But I just sometimes will shoot the pastor an email saying, "Hey, I'm coming to church Sunday. Is that all right?" And they're always very happy to, and I always get a nice warm welcome. And everybody knows me now, I think. So it's really special. And um, the people, they've been through a lot, but there isn't a bitterness. I don't think it's more of this is the way it was. And this is sometimes the way it still is. But I love my day job. I love covering Baltimore County, but I could write about the Black communities of the Eastern Shore all the time, every day, and I would never run out of things to write about and things to say. And so I love that too. And I'm gonna be kind of sad when I'm done with the book. But hoping that with the relationships I've made, I can keep coming back and doing more stories. So,
So when will the book be ready for purchase, and when will you start your book tour?
oh God, a bookstore would be lovely. They don't do book tours that often, but I will
Okay.
if they do not send me on a book tour, I will do my own book tour
Okay.
with the people I know on the Eastern Shore. I can probably get that arranged.
Hmm.
Um, the book is due in December, and
Okay.
because I have a full-time job, I take time off from my regular job
Hmm.
to work on the book. So I'm about to take 2 weeks off now. And then I took 2 weeks off in October, and I'll take another 2 weeks off probably in June. And then if I need to, I will ask if I can have like an unpaid book leave as I get closer. But some of the chapters are not that tough for me to do because I've done all the
Hmm.
reporting. A couple of them are like really hard because they're new. So, for example, I'm trying to write about the rendering plant that's in Linkwood that's been there for ages. And it's known now, it used to be called Valley Proteins. I don't remember what it's called now, but um, recently it's been a problem that's been known, and there have been lawsuits and whatnot, but it was a problem back in the 50s and 60s, and I don't know how much of that was documented. So I have to go. I've started, I called Maryland Department of Environment. Well, the Department of the Environment is younger than the pollution at this plant, so they didn't have any records from then. I've got to go to the health department and see what they have, but I might strike out there too. And so some of it is going to be laborious and um, work I haven't done before. So that might take a while. The other stories in the book, like, you know, lack of, I have a chapter on, communities that don't have septic systems and how it got that way. I mean, I've done 20 years of reporting on those topics, so that's not as much as of a stretch for me. I know where to find the information. I know basically what to say. But, I think Johns Hopkins, who's publishing the book, challenged me to do more public health pieces in the book. And that's good, I think, but it's not something I've done a ton of work on prior. So it's going to be, that's going to be a bit of a deeper dive. And, I don't know how eager counties are to give me records of, if they even have them, of decisions on where to extend sewer and where not to. So that's all ahead of me this year.
Oh, okay. You've got your work cut out for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, uh, so, I think 99% of what I've read about Harriet Tubman is based on her life, her early years on the Eastern
Hmm.
Shore, and not much written about her time spent in Baltimore City. And I even had a conversation with Kate Larson as well. I was like, hey, I was reading your book. I didn't see anything about the Tilly escape in your book, or the time that she might have spent on Slimmer's Alley at her brother-in-law Tom Tubman's home there, where the Reginald F. Lewis Museum is. And she was like, well, that was new information that we found out after the book was published in the early 2000s. Will you be covering any information about Harriet's time in Baltimore City, and have you uncovered new stories about either the Tilly escape or her time on Slimmer's Alley and some of the escapes that she helped organize and plan here in Baltimore City?
I'm not going to be touching on that in the book, but I will say, one thing that always makes me smile is I work at the Banner, and
It's
we
right across the street.
yeah, we park in the garage at Pier 5, and every day that I go to the office, I walk past that sign that explains how Tilly escaped.
Yes.
And one thing that I think maybe Baltimoreans don't appreciate that much is how much of a conduit we were as a city for all kinds of travelers. And I just did a story for the Banner on this chapel in Nottingham, Maryland, which is in Baltimore, Eastern Baltimore County. It was a story about a family the first Black family to own property in Perry Hall, and they still have their property. And there was this chapel called Dowden Chapel where they had a little hatch under the lectern where the preacher is, and they used it to hide people. And I mean, we like when we it's really hard to envision what Baltimore City looked like, 200 years ago. And the only reason that I have any sense of what it might look like is because I spend so much time on the Eastern Shore, and so much of the Eastern Shore looks like it did 200 years ago. And so you do get a sense of like, what things look like. But if you think about, the time before the highways, Bel Air Road, um, York Road, these were conduits up north. And Pratt Street is where there was a huge um they were buying and selling enslaved people on Pratt Street.
Hope
Au-
Slater's jail on Platt Street. Yeah.
Austin, yeah, Slater's Jail, Austin Woolfolk.
Hmm.
There were like three major traders who
Hmm.
dealt with people here. There's no monument to it on Pratt Street. You would never know it was there. But you had this busy place with, ship traffic and train traffic and horse-drawn carriages. And it was just like people were passing through. And so it was a place where a lot of people, I mean, a lot of Black people found themselves endangered in Baltimore City because they were taken
Right.
and put into slavery. As free people, they were captured, just as in Philadelphia. But even more so than Philadelphia, Baltimore was a place in between where there's this push and pull. There was 90% of, or 90 to 95% of the Black people living in Baltimore in 1850 were free. So a small percent were enslaved. And so a Black person could, with some disguise and some phony papers, pass through here and get north. I mean, north is I live in Towson. I think the Pennsylvania line is 30 miles from my
Hmm.
house.
Hmm.
Like it isn't far. Of course, to get from where I live to the line, you had to pass through some pretty brutal slave territory.
Right.
You were passing through the plantations of northern Baltimore County.
Hmm. Hmm.
But if you could make it, then you made it.
Right.
And so I think that I'm really glad that I don't know if it's Baltimore Heritage or who, but I'm really glad that there's more information, more signs about that because when
Hmm.
I first moved here, there really wasn't much about it. And
Hmm.
you didn't know much about Frederick Douglass or Harriet Tubman and their time in Baltimore City or any of these other folks that were involved in squiring people away. And there were lots of them. I mean, there were lots of Underground Railroad conductors and maybe freelancers. I don't not necessarily attached to it, but just helping.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean it's a really, I mean, I know there have been books written about it. My friend Scott Shane wrote a great book called Flee North.
Oh yeah. I just recently finished that. Yep.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
amazing. But
Amazing
I
book.
think I never get tired of hearing about that. Like
Hmm.
I think Baltimore has always been such an interesting city to me, not being from here. Like
Hmm.
it has had this incredible role in American history, and I sometimes think we don't know enough about that. And I'm always learning more and fascinated by what I hear and learn.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I think the one thing that makes the Tilly escape so um it was the one that she came closest to getting caught in Seaford, Delaware, but the whole phenomenon of number one coming from Canada through Baltimore to try to find, Tilly, how many auctions, slave auctions did she pass at shops
mhm.
or on the pier there at Pier 4, right? But the thought of going south, she actually went back through Dorchester County up to Nancoke to Delaware. But I'm always fascinated by that escape because, like I said, that was the one that she came the closest to being caught. Just her boldness of walking into this hotel in Seaford, Delaware, saying, "Where's my robe?"
Yeah. I mean, the story of the Dover Eight is fascinating too.
Yes,
Like
yes.
there's so many, daring escapes. I mean, thinking back, and I think about Frederick Douglass too, like getting dressed up and boarding a train and
Right,
just, okay, I'm done. I'm going
right,
to Philly.
right,
Like, I
right.
mean, just, walking, and that was from Baltimore.
Hmm,
He
hmm,
left, and probably, the most one of a very recognizable man, and people didn't notice him,
hmm, hmm,
didn't see him.
hmm.
And yeah, I mean, so it is really interesting. And I think we should lean into that history more, because it I think Baltimore has a spirit about it, sort of being this place in between that
Hmm.
you just don't find other places. And it's interesting. It's
Do you I'm glad that they recently, I guess in the last couple of years, put up a marker where Frederick Douglass did hop on the train on Boston Street. Is that Boston or Fleet? That's Boston Street, in
yeah.
the Canton area. Do you write much about Frederick Douglass? I don't know that I've seen a lot. Maybe I've just missed it. But
No,
do you
I
no? Okay,
don't. I
okay.
don't really write much about Douglas. And in fact, my colleague, I saw that um the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum has a new exhibit about Frederick Douglass, and I think it's
Oh,
their
okay.
first exhibit about Douglas,
Okay.
and it's called I think it's called Bear Me into Freedom, and
Yes.
it's about Douglas and the Bay. And I said to my editor, I think we should write about this. And he's like, yeah, but not you. You do too much on the Eastern Shore. So he gave it to my colleague Kaylee, who did a wonderful job on it. And yeah, I don't do much with Douglas,
Hmm.
in part because I'm so immersed in Tubman. And you know, Frederick Douglass's story is well, I guess I should say the reason I became interested in Harriet Tubman is, as an environmental reporter, so much of her story is about the land. It's
Hmm.
about, how she hid, where she went, it's about, the mud flats and the ships and the bay, and, you know, um, the different pathways that she took, the paths in the woods, as Alex is often pointing out to me. Um, Frederick Douglass's story really isn't about that. I mean, his story is not really even about the Eastern Shore, because he left as a young man, and his story is more, I think, rooted in American history and this larger story of, of what it was like to be enslaved and how important the freedom was. Um, and what him as an inspirational figure for others at the time. And so it's just a really different story. And um, I felt like Harriet has had, several biographers, and Douglas has had many more. But I felt like where I had something to add to any of this was in my environment reporting, and like looking at the land as a character in the Harriet Tubman story. Um, because like if if she had lived in Georgia or Alabama, could she have done what she did? Um, it was the very nature of the Eastern Shore, the community and the land and the curvature of the water, and the way it creates these places, on the edge where you can hide. It's like part water, part land, not quite sure where it is. And that kind of is how Maryland is too, like part south, part north, brackish, we are. Um, and so I just think that really drew me to Harriet. And I've read Douglas's a couple of his books. I mean, I think he's incredible, but I just don't know what I have to add to writing about him, other than, what the one area where I have written about him, I should say, is Highland Beach, which is a chapter in the book. This this incorporated community in Annapolis that his son bought and built. And, to get back to what you said originally, Frederick Douglass thought that owning property for Black Americans was incredibly important.
Right.
And he did buy a church in Fells Point, and had it demolished and built, I think, four row houses.
Mhm. Strawberry
Um,
Alley is now Dallas Street. Hmm.
yes.
Hmm.
So, And he also encouraged his son to, to develop the community of Highland Beach. And the house called Twin Oaks that was to be Frederick Douglass's summer house, it looked out on the bay to Talbot County, and so he wanted to be able to see the land where he had been enslaved. He never was able to move into the house because he died before it was finished,
Hmm.
but that he passed away knowing that there was going to be this beach community on the bay that was for Black people, built by Black people. Surely was a highlight to him, I would think. So yeah, that's the only place I've really written about Douglas.
Well, you mentioned the Maritime Museum and the Bare Meat of Freedom exhibit. Shouts out to Jeff McGinnis, who is the actual author of the book, Bare Meat of Freedom, and he actually has created a film, kind of an immersive film on that book. So that should be launching very soon as well.
Oh,
And he
cool.
was instrumental in introducing me to Dennis Glacken, who's the vice chair of the St. Michael's kind of climate resiliency committee, because that area is suffering from sea level rise and water intrusion and land subsidence as well. And so we just had a conversation with him, interviewed him on Friday, and was talking about the museum and just kind of different things that they're trying to do to secure that location from sea level rise. So it was a very interesting conversation, and it was interesting as well just to see in my own research from studying that area just how much time, I think Frederick Douglass was there for like a year or two enslaved at the Thomas Auld home. But
Mhm.
fascinating story. You touched briefly on the eroding history film. I want to go back there. Have you been back out to deal? If you could do a kind of where are they now type film, what changes would you see based on the last time you're out there filming and documenting and interviewing residents there?
So I do go back out there, periodically. I was there a couple months ago. Just sadly, more people are passing away.
Mm.
Ducky Wallace, who's in the film, his wife just died. Chanel's father died. Of course, Vince Leggett is not with us anymore. Gertrude Brown, one of the reverends who's in the movie, she just died. Um, and as far as the church that Chanel and her family is trying to preserve, they were supposed to get a big grant. I'm not sure if they got it yet, but I'm that's one of the things I'm most happy about is the film did kind of put that church on the map and say,
Sure,
hey,
right.
we really need to
Hmm.
do something here to preserve this church. So I haven't talked to her lately to see how that's coming along. Um, but the community, Chanel herself no longer lives on Deal Island full time because she's teaching at a school in Delaware, so she's moved there. I think she still has her family home, but the area is really the the Black community that was there is really dwindling, and so as time goes on, it dwindles further. The one thing that will help that church is they did a living shoreline project, which is going to slow down the wave action, and that will probably help the church from further deteriorating. But they need to act quickly, um, and get it preserved. Um,
Will that film ever make it to YouTube, or is it intentionally
um,
not on YouTube? I know I can still find it on the PBS website, but
Yeah, it's on the PBS website, and we just signed another deal with Maryland Public Television so that
okay,
they can run it, I think, for the next 2 or 3 years.
okay,
So it'll be in a loop on there. But yeah,
okay.
it's I don't know if we can put it on YouTube. I'm not sure.
Mm,
I think the terms of our agreement might say that we can't.
mhm.
So but anyone can watch it on the PBS Passport
Sure,
app. Like
sure.
you just Google eroding history, it'll come up and people can watch it.
And
And they
that
can,
URL will magically appear here on the screen
yes.
as
Okay.
well. So.
All right, good, good, good. Yeah. Um, we're really proud of the film, and I think the thing that makes us happiest is that the people we made the film about like it and
Yeah,
share it
that's
and
always a good thing.
you know are happy with it. So,
So how do you, as we close out, how are you engaging the youth? You know, Vincent Leggett is no longer here, of course, but we, um, had Akil Leggett speak,
mhm.
Vincent's grandson, and Akil talks about he filmed from his dorm room in at University of Chicago, and he talked about how his grandfather Vince was passing the torch to him when he was 6 years old. How are you engaging the youth about these stories and getting them excited and making sure that when you're talking to black and brown youth that they don't feel like climate change or climate resiliency is like a thing for white people, right? This is something that involves all of us. Like, what's that like in your world when you're engaging youth?
Well, because my full-time job is as a reporter, I mean, I am available to speak and I love to do it. So I do it, whenever I have a chance. There's a place called the community school where I talk. I used to teach at a couple different colleges, but I stopped that because I need to focus my free time on writing the book. But I think um, it's not that hard to engage people when they can see with their own eyes the changes in their communities. So whether you call it sea level rise or you call it, coastal resilience, people can see that there's water in their yards where there didn't used to be,
Right.
and that, they're losing landmarks, um, and that, a lot of people who grow up on the Eastern Shore decide to leave the Eastern Shore for better opportunities. But one of the reasons why they leave for better opportunities is because they don't see a future like with jobs, but also they can see that the land is sinking and they are not sure if they will have a home there. So I don't actually think it's as hard. It can be hard to talk about. I think where the climate movement sometimes loses people is we talk so much big picture, like, oh, we need to reduce greenhouse gases and we need to reduce fossil fuels and we need to move to
Embodied
renewable energy.
carbon.
Yeah. And we do need to do all
Right,
of those
right,
things.
right, right, right.
But, we also need to clean out the ditches on the Eastern Shore.
Mm,
And we need to make sure that we're giving we're rebuilding roads when they flood,
mhm.
and we're elevating houses and we're allowing people to elevate their houses, without discriminating against that. And we have to look at things like tax sales, which is part of the book, and make sure people are not losing their property to tax sales. So none of those things are like global and insurmountable problems. They're localized solutions. And,
Local
we should.
systemic zoning, permitting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and like I talked to one of the counties, I think it was Dorchester, and they said like we systematically clean out the ditches. We're on a cycle and we just, we do our cycle. And so like if you call us and say your ditch needs to be cleaned out, like we'll come to you when it's your turn. Um
Put you in the queue.
yeah, and so, I mean that means that, areas that flood all the time are just not, and a lot of these departments don't have the staff they used to have. Um, and if it's a road where not that many people live, um, it could not be high priority, and then you don't clean the ditch out, and then you get another storm, and then it floods again, and it's worse. So I don't think people on the Eastern Shore deny. I think it's a myth that people on the Eastern Shore deny climate change. Um, Certainly that is not true among the Black community on the Eastern
Right.
Shore. I've never heard any of the more than hundreds of Black residents of the shore interviewed, I've never heard one of them say that climate change isn't real.
Right.
The politicians will say that, the white politicians will
Mhm.
say that. But I've never heard a black person say it because they experience it so acutely
Right.
that they're not going to say. And they don't spend a lot of time arguing about what is causing the issues either. They just say, the land is sinking, the water is rising, there's more water in my yard than there used to be, there's more flooding on my road than there used to be,
Mm.
and I wish someone would do something about it. Um, so, there isn't a lot of denial of the problem, I don't think, there. Where it gets tricky is there's one black representative in the General Assembly, one black Democrat, and one Democrat, period, Cherie Sample Hughes. The rest of the delegation is Republican, white, and conservative. And so, it's difficult to be heard over that. Um, and that is a systematic problem
Yeah. Yeah.
of decades, centuries of underrepresentation
Mhm.
of Black residents of the Eastern Shore.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, Rona, this has been great. Tell us one more time the full title of the book.
The book is going to be called What Harriet Left Behind, and then colon, um, Rural Redlining, Rising Seas, and Land Loss on Maryland's Eastern Shore. It's going to be turned into the publisher in December of this year, and I think it will come out 2028, let's say.
Okay.
I hope 2028,
Okay.
mid-year 2028. So,
Okay. Well,
um,
we'll all be waiting for it. We're very excited to read it. I'm excited to get a signed copy. So, when that
definitely.
opportunity makes itself available, please let us know, and we'll, alert our audience as well. And we'll definitely be following you on social media and following you at the banner as well. Anything that I didn't ask you that you want people to know about yourself or the work that you're doing right now?
Um, I just feel very, very lucky and very privileged to be able to do this work. This has been this this work on the Black communities of the Eastern Shore and climate change has been part of my life and Harriet Tubman for the last, I'm gonna say, 15 years. So it's a huge chunk of my professional life has been spent on it, and it's hard because it's a difficult subject, but it's I couldn't be happier to be um sort of championing this issue and people know letting people know what Harriet left behind and what is still there, so and what people deserve,
Mm.
people who have worked hard their whole lives, whose ancestors uh, got land, bought land to secure their futures, what they deserve,
Mm.
which is a whole lot better than what they're getting.
Absolutely. And I think you'll be joining us on the March 19th, the underground underwater bus tour as well.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be on the bus tour giving a kind of a tour on the bus of what we'll be seeing as we go down and sort of talking about the things in my book. I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to talk about,
It's
but
okay.
just telling people a little bit about the landscape we pass and the history of the shore. I don't know how many of the people on the bus tour are going to be familiar with any of what I've shared with you.
Mhm.
So, it might be a review for some, but I think for most people, they will not know most of this stuff.
I agree. I agree. We're excited to have you, excited about the work that you're doing, and keep up the great work. We're definitely rooting for you here
Thank you.
throughout the region. So, Rona Kobell, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's really been a pleasure to get to know you and to share what I'm working on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Safe travels on your vacation.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.